Nigeria's tax system is undergoing sweeping reforms designed to boost revenue generation, enhance compliance, and promote accountability, all with the goal of fostering shared prosperity and a more business-friendly environment. However, the proposed changes have sparked mixed reactions from policymakers and citizens alike, given Nigeria's complex tax history. What makes this tax regime significant, and what opportunities can it unlock for individuals and businesses?
Hi everyone, welcome to the maiden edition of Policy in Focus series on NESG TV. I am Aderibigbe.
And I'm Jakpor. We'll be your host on today's episode.
Today, we'll be discussing Nigeria's tax reform, unlocking opportunities for shared prosperity. And to help us discuss and dimension this topic for the benefit of you, our viewers, we have here with us Mr. Taiwo Oyedele. He's the chairman of the Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms Committee. You are welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me.
All right, sir. So, sir, basically, very recently, I think about last week or so, there was a public hearing on the tax bill. So, there has been a lot of issues, back and forth on the bill and its importance and how, the people on the streets, how it's, pays them, if this tax reform bill passes. So, sir, we are looking at how does this tax reform issues now, how does it address Nigeria's obsolete tax laws? In terms of, we know that as time progresses, we need to change, our laws, in respect to current situations. But how does this tax bill address, our obsolete laws?
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me start first by appreciating the NESG for always providing the platform to bring issues of policy affecting our people and our country into focus. So we're grateful for that platform and for the interest. So you're right, our tax laws are very old. Some of the tax laws are older than Nigeria's independence, so which means those of us at this meeting we were not born when those laws were introduced. And some of them were written in very complex languages that you take a sentence, you read it, and it has possibly 2, 3, 4 correct interpretation. That's what we call ambiguity. And some of them are no longer fit for purpose in terms of what are those canons of taxation in terms of convenience of when I should pay, how I should pay, who I should pay to. So you want to pay a tax of 1,000 and you need to get on the bus and go to the tax office to go and register. Those complications are no longer fit for purpose. They can't take Nigeria to the next level. And therefore, one of the ideas we came up with was to say, why don't we repeal all the old laws? And assuming that we have a brand new country today that is called Nigeria, what should the tax laws look like? And then we develop those new laws. Of course, it doesn't mean that everything we had up until now was bad. So there are provisions there that are still good. So we just migrated them. In some cases, we modify the language so it's more in tune with today's understanding of English language. And then we identify where there are gaps and say, what should we have there? What is it that we have currently that we should get rid of? So we did that. And then the other thing was to try and harmonize and consolidate. Why do I need to go through 10, 15 tax laws to know the taxes I need to pay as an individual, when I can do that by just going through one tax law, or maybe two, one for the taxes you pay and the other one for how it is administered? And it's even likely based on the submission during the public hearing and what the lawmakers are considering, that they may even consolidate all the 4 bills into one, which is also good. The only reason why we didn't do that ourselves was we're trying to make sure there's some level of certainty and stability so that anything to do with administration, you don't have to always amend it every single year. If you're establishing the revenue authority, you don't need to amend it frequently, so that you then only just amend what you need to amend when the time becomes necessary. So it's about simplifying the number of taxes, how they are paid, harmonizing them, and even how they are administered. So All those things are spread across the tax reform bills to accomplish that objective.
Now, sir, going to the layman's perspective, I mean, based on the selling point of all the four bills, says it's going to make life easier for them. Now, the question on their minds is, I'm supposed to be paying government out of my meager resources. How does it make life easier for me? How does it simplify my life?
Yeah, so one of the objectives of the reforms is to promote equity, which is really about fairness. And equity means you treat unequal people unequally, and you treat equal people equally. So if I'm a low-income earner, I'm struggling to make ends meet, I should not be paying income taxes to the government. The dream we have for our country is to get to a point where the government actually pays you every month to make up your small income so you can feed your family, you can have roof over your head, you can cater for the education of your children, and then you can take care of your health. Those four things are very important. If any individual is unable to meet those needs, they have no capacity to give anything to anyone. We must recognize that in the first place, taxes are the way that we mobilize resources from society to take care of society. That person needs to be catered for, not to cater for other people. So what we've done in those bills is to have those proposals to exempt low-income earners, small businesses, and also the consumption that are essential, food, accommodation, education, health, to remove the VAT on those items. So to a very large extent, we were very intentional in how we've proposed the structure of the system and the tax bills that will become tax laws, and once they are passed by the lawmakers, what the ordinary Nigerian will see, that they will see that big relief in the burden that they currently carry coming from the tax system.
Okay, thank you very much, sir, for that explanation. It's the essence of NESG TV, especially this Policy in Focus series, is to break it in easy to understand language, for the man on the streets. Now, for payee now, which is, I think that's like more like personal income tax, I believe. So it's like for payee rates now, as an income earner, what is the difference between, what I'm earning before, or what I'm paying as taxes before, rather, and what I will be paying under the new, the new tax law, if passed?
Yeah, so you're right. Anybody who is earning income, either as an employee or even when you're self-employed and you earn an income, you need to pay personal income tax. So in Nigeria, if you are in employment, that is deducted on a monthly basis, and it's called pay-as-you-earn tax, payee. So it's a form of paying your personal income tax in installments so that it's affordable. Imagine if they pay you all your salary for the whole year without collecting taxes, and in December when you're preparing for Christmas, they say, "Oh, guy, you have not paid tax." So what we've done is to look at what is the threshold of minimum wage earners. It's currently 70,000. That's the national minimum wage. Some states have slightly higher than that. So we did 800,000 naira per annum at 0% PAYE or personal income tax. And then there's an extra 200,000 as rent relief. So when you put it together, it comes to 1 million a year, or 83,000 naira per month. So anybody that is earning that level of income will not pay any personal income tax. They will not have to worry about PAYE at all. Above that, up to middle class level, which we estimated at around 1.7 million naira a month, they will see a reduction in their PAYE. So which means they will have more disposable income once these laws are enacted. And the people who are high income earner, high net worth individuals, they will then pay slightly more. Up to about 25%. Currently, the maximum effective you pay is around 19%. So the idea is to then make the system progressive, so people pay according to their ability. So you are taking more from the people that have to take care of people that do not have, and that's how a society is meant to operate.
Okay, sir. I'll still. I just want you to buttress some points from what you've mentioned. You know, for payee now, you said for earners of like about 1.7 million monthly. Do we have a certain percentage rate that the new tax law proposes for those people? And what was like the previous earnings for those people? I mean, for middle income earners for that bracket.
Yeah, so what we did was to, at the committee level when we were debating this, so we deliberated on what threshold of income should be totally exempt. And of course, we're also mindful that there are states where maybe 80-90% of their workers are below that threshold. So if you raise it too high, you're going to create problems for many of the states in terms of their IGR. So we're trying to balance so many things. So we discussed that level of 1 million a year or 83,000 a month should not pay tax. 1.7 million, based on the data available to us, was the estimation of where the middle class falls. And by the way, 1.7 million and below already caters for more than 90% of all workers in the private and public sector. So once we did that, we developed the tax table. There's a table for income band and tax rate, such that the amount of reduction in your PAYE will be bigger at the lowest end. Of course, some of them are paying zero. So which means if we're paying 5,000 naira a month before, it becomes zero. That's 100% removal of your PAYE. And then that 100% reduces as we go up.
Okay.
Yeah, so in fact, we have a model that we're thinking of how to share it with the public, so people can go and put their salary number there and they'll see the comparison. So it's not something I can tell you, for every
tax bracket,
exactly.
bracket,
but that's the principle behind it.
Okay.
Yes.
So I was wondering, this value-added tax, so it's going to benefit subnationals, but again, especially from the south where there's a lot of production and all that, how do you balance? How do you build balance the north-south dichotomy, which was the case?
I don't think there's a north-south dichotomy. I think people just did not understand what we're trying to propose. Our proposal was more around consumption, not production.
Okay.
So you can have more production in, say, Ogun State. By the way, Ogun State is allocated a very small percentage of VAT derivation, because almost all the companies that produce in Ogun State are headquartered in Lagos, and Lagos is getting the credit. So if you take something like, soft drinks, it's consumed everywhere in Nigeria. You take telecommunication, people make calls everywhere in Nigeria. So the bulk of the items that generate Nigeria's VAT are consumed fairly evenly across Nigeria. Even by you go to, village markets, you go to Okiari, you go to Onisha, you go to Kano market, and they're making calls. Right? So that's each time they make any call, they are consuming VAT. So what we wanted Nigeria to implement was a system that truly reflects VAT as a consumption tax and gives the credit to the state where the consumption is taking place, not where the production is taking place. Of course, that was very well misunderstood by a large section of our society. And at some point, when you are trying to do reforms, you should expect that it's not everything that people would accept, it's not everything that people would understand, and it's not a journey that happens overnight. So sometimes you need to take those steps gradually. And so when the governors came back with their counter proposals, we had no objections to it. And from all we have seen, from all indications, the lawmakers are also fine with that proposal. So most likely what will happen is, what the governors have proposed, which is they said we should moderate the percentage of VAT that is shared based on derivation, and then let the bigger portion be shared based on equality and population. So that's where we landed.
Okay, sir, but still on this VAT issue now, you talked about consumption. So for instance, let's take the telecommunications sector, for instance. So with the new proposed tax law, is it where the calls are made or where they are received that will get more of the VAT?
Yes, so the person that is charged is the person that determines where the VAT
goes.
So if I call you, they will charge me, not you. So if I'm in Abuja and I call you, then the VAT comes to Abuja.
Abuja, okay.
Right. So because that's the person that is paying it.
Paying it.
Which would also be spread. People originate calls from everywhere in Nigeria, right?
Yeah.
Instead of all the VAT on all the calls in Nigeria today being attributed to Lagos, because that's where the telcos are headquartered, it will now be spread across Nigeria as people originate their calls.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir. So let's move forward now. We've had conversations previously about how a whole lot of Nigeria has like a larger informal sector. You understand? I don't know how this tax law now proposes to widen the tax bracket in a way where a lot of the informal sector are able to pay taxes.
Yeah, our approach is slightly different. Yes. So we recognize that we have a large informal sector. Yes. We do not entirely agree that we should try and extract as much as possible from the informal sector. Okay. And Nigeria is currently trying to make every single player in the informal sector to pay tax. We don't think that is the right thing to do. Our approach, which we have put in those bills, is one, how can we get data about everyone, whether you're a formal or informal sector player? So get the data. And once you have the data, how can you draw a line to say below this threshold, you're just hustling? Yeah, so people are struggling to make end meet. Some of them would like to work in organized private sector and earn salary. They can't find anything. They're graduates, some of them with first class. And you're now doing some buying and selling. Some of them are doing it in traffic, and you want to extract, it's not fair. So we believe that once you establish that threshold, you should exempt them from tax. And when we did our analysis, that's about 97% of the informal sector should not be burdened with tax. They should be exempted from income tax, VAT, no withholding tax. Our data shows that the top 3% of the informal sector, that's over 1 million businesses, is where you need to focus on because they're the ones who have the capacity to pay, right? And then if we exempt this majority of informal sector from paying taxes, they have to demonstrate that they are within that threshold. To demonstrate it, they must keep records. So what we're also trying to do is to incentivize formalization of businesses. Because if you're a vulcanizer or you're a tailor, and I come to you and say, how much is your sales? And I say, you don't know. You can't give me any record. Then you do presumptive tax. I will still make you pay tax because I don't know whether you're making 200 million naira. So the moment you're able to keep record, and it could just be as simple as making sure that payment is made into your bank account. So when you see your bank statement, you can put your turnover together. Okay. So once you're able to do some form of formalizing your business, you enjoy all those exemptions. And so long as Nigeria is able to get credible data about everyone, formal, informal sector, big and small companies, it gives us useful data for economic planning, even beyond taxes. So that even when government wants to provide intervention, maybe you want to do capacity building for small business owners, you want to make credit available to them at single digits, maybe you want to prioritize some sectors, you have the data to do that. When COVID hit the world in 2019, 2020, there are countries where the intervention they gave to their citizens was from the tax records. They see you were filing returns, they knew who was poor, they knew their bank account, they knew where they lived. People just got credited. So we're carrying things around here, food to money. A lot of it didn't get to the intended beneficiary because we don't have credible data and we're not connecting the dots. So these reforms are seeking to change that.
Thank you, sir.
Somebody said I should mention this yesterday. She said she was more particular about the transparency and accountability part of it. So she was asking, would there be a dashboard? So, I can be able to track all of these things. Not many Nigerians are interested in, necessarily educated about FIRS, and which we are changing now to another agency and all of that. But not many Nigerians are so educated about how they can track the payments that they make and to ensure that there's equity and there's fairness. So is there some kind of incentive like that that's going to encourage participation so people know that their monies are actually being used for the right purpose?
Yeah, people should show interest and participate, but ordinarily, anywhere in the world, it's not everybody that will track and hold government to account. It's usually the middle class. So if somebody is earning 50,000 naira a month, struggling to make end meets, the last thing on their mind is to track what government is doing. And they're even struggling to find money to buy 50 naira airtime to flash people. They don't have, there's no data to go and browse the
internet.
And the elite are too close to the government. They don't want to ask questions. So that's why it's important for the middle class to take on that role on behalf of society. So what we've proposed in those bills, one, the level of transparency of reporting the performance by the revenue agencies. What is it that you have collected? In fact, we have requirement for those things to be published on their websites within a particular time frame. In addition to giving it to National Assembly, Federal Reserve Council, and NEC, you must publish it online. It must be accessible. And we also have provisions there that would enable us to develop a system where every taxpayer can access their accounts and see what's going on their own account. We also have provisions to ensure that the tax agents, because for the big taxpayers, they are represented by consultants. Those tax agents are also going to be regulated and will track what everybody is doing on the system. There's a requirement there for whistleblowing as well, to also put some control on the tax officers, in addition to the fact that we also have the tax ombudsman. So we've created in those reforms some structures that can help us become transparent by design, rather than when I feel like telling them, I will tell them, and what information I will give out. So we think that's a big part of trying to address the problem around transparency and accountability and how we utilize tax revenue for the benefit of the people. The other part of it is not in the tax bills, it's in the national fiscal policy that we also have developed. Is awaiting final approvals now, where we have framework around spending. And it shows that you cannot just wake up as a governor or your president or your local government chairman and just decide that the best project is to build a mall, right? Maybe that's not what your people need. So there's a process for needs assessment and analysis that shows what is the priority to your people. Because again, back to your point around participation, let the people tell you what's their priority. Maybe they want road from the farm to the market. Maybe they just want primary schools to have roof over their head. They want to have teachers with study materials. Maybe they just need health centers to take care of malaria and basic things. Don't go and do flyover when people have no potable water. So those issues are also outlined in those fiscal policy documents.
Well, thank you very much. They're very key. But just tied to that, the ombudsman you mentioned, because Nigerians are typically very skeptical about how their interests are served and advocated for. So what makes this ombudsman different from the other public complaints and the advocacy platform that we have, not necessarily even in the tax system but elsewhere?
Yeah, ombudsman is a very popular concept in many countries. In fact, we had a conversation, I think it was the ambassador from Sweden, who said this started in their country and they were willing to share some ideas with us. Tax is a very special area of our lives because government is taking your resources directly. So as an individual, even as a business, it doesn't matter how big you are very weak compared to the states. The state has so much powers that even when you are right, you can still be punished. If government shows up and say that you haven't paid taxes and your tax is 150 million naira, and they say we give you 48 hours to pay, otherwise we shut down your business. It may even be possible that government is owing you, that you have overpaid. But to go to court and fight that might take you 5 to 10 years. Your business is already closed, right? So how do you create a mechanism that protects the taxpayers, particularly the most vulnerable taxpayers? And those are usually the small businesses. One, they do not necessarily have the knowledge of finance to know what the law says they should pay, which is why we think the majority of them should actually be exempted so they don't have to worry about it. Two, they do not have the resources to hire professionals to help them understand. They can't afford to pay lawyers, they can't pay accountants, they can't pay tax professionals. When they have disputes with a taxman relating to tax matters, they cannot approach the courts. They don't have the means, they don't understand the process, they can't hire lawyers. So they're essentially left out there in the cold. And some tax officers take advantage of them. They say, Mama, Papa, you never pay VAT. The person is saying, what is VAT? Yeah. Never pay withholding tax. Say, what's withholding tax? Say, Mama, you're owing 4 million. Mama will start begging. It's possible that they are not supposed to pay. So that is a critical role of the tax ombudsman. So the ombud, at no cost to you, there are no formalities of processes. You know, lawyers, sometimes they can create complications. They say the process must be this way, this number of copies, there's a way you address the judge. You don't need that. You can speak Pidgin, you can speak Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba. You can vent. Your English does not need to be correct. You don't even need to write. You just need to call. You need to send a message, email, whatever works for you. You can go physically to the office and they look at your case and take it up on your behalf. There's enough powers in those bills for the ombud to prevail on the tax officer to do what the law says. If the law says when you raise an assessment, I have 30 days to pay. Don't write to me and say you give me 48 hours or 7 days. The ombudsman will say, well, this your 7 days is not in the law and you must reverse it. So the role of the ombudsman, essentially, one, is to protect the taxpayers, particularly those that are vulnerable and can't protect themselves. Number two is, as people are bringing complaints here and there, they are gathering data to identify the areas where there's a problem in the law. Because if from 15 states, small businesses are complaining about something, it must be that that something was not properly designed, right? So you can then amend the law to make it simpler. When they also identify gaps, they'll make those recommendations to the appropriate authorities, maybe Ministry of Finance in terms of policy, maybe the lawmakers in terms of the law, or whatever it is. So over time, the ombuds will ensure that there's moderation in the system, that there's fairness in the system, and more importantly, there is a very affordable means of seeking redress without having to pay an arm and a leg that you actually don't have in the first place.
All right, thank you, sir. So, sir, still on tax collection now. I think there was a report previously by one of the business consulting firms about how much tax revenue the government loses to maybe illegal tax collectors or even legal tax collectors. So this present law, if enacted now, how will it cater for those, for those revenue lost, for the government?
Yeah, so we have the, formal taxes, which is enacted by law, collected by government, paid to government accounts, and all of that. And we have the informal taxes, which is somebody will stop you and say you have to pay. You want to build in some places like Lagos, Amonile will collect their own. And then you have the implicit taxes, which is nobody is forcing you to pay, but you just have to take care of these for things to work for you. So people contribute to fix the road within their estates, they generate their water. Some people contribute to fix the roof of the primary school where their kids are going to school in their community because there's no roof. Those are implicit taxes. So if you combine those, the formal taxes, informal taxes, and implicit taxes, the burden is so high. So what we're trying to do is to address all three of them, starting with the formal one. And then the informal one is, one of the ways to address it is, if you reduce the number of taxes to 1 or 2, then the chances that somebody will come and confuse you to pay a tax that is not on the list of 2 is reduced. Today, the list is so long, nobody knows where it starts and where it ends. So sometimes you just want to get out of trouble, you just pay and move on. Number 2 is to also ensure that those taxes are no longer paid in cash. So in the reform bills, we have provision to outlaw cash payments. So let every tax be paid electronically, either USSD on your phone, you can do transfers, you can use payment card. If you don't have a mobile phone and you don't have a bank account, then you should not be paying any tax, right? So that's the concept. There's nobody, whether educated or illiterate, who is doing economic activities, they'll have a phone. If they don't, then they're not doing anything.
Absolutely.
Yes. So that concept is going to over time help us to address these non-state actors collecting taxes here, because they're creating a lot of confusion in the system, which is complicating our economic situation. If people are moving food items from the north, for example, to the south, some of them pay as high as 500,000 naira on one trip. That's more than 30, 50 stops. 2,000 here, 1,005 here. At the end of the day, when the goods arrive at their destination, ordinary person cannot afford them anymore. Yeah.
All right.
So since the bill, I mean, we're expecting that the bill will be signed, and then by July, probably the law will be in full swing. What traditionally Nigerians are not, the traditional way that tax collectors are viewed. So there's a lot of mindset shift that has to happen. So in the run up to July, I know this is part of the sensitization campaign, but for the underserved especially, and those that are in the informal sector, what's in the pipeline to educate them about their rights and the old tax regime?
Yeah, so the commencement of the laws, the bills, when they are enacted into law, will be determined by the lawmakers. Of course, Mr. President also will have his say as to when it should commence. So it may be July, it may be later, because currently the lawmakers are still going through the process of editing the document based on the public hearing. But whatever time that's going to be, will be a time that gives sufficient space for there to be more awareness and capacity building. While the controversy about the bills have been intense, the good part of it is it was creating awareness. So almost every Nigerian now is aware. Even if you go to villages, they know there's a tax bill. They may not know the content so much, right? And because we've created an exemption for the majority of the Nigerian people, particularly at the bottom of the ladder, they don't need any capacity building, right? Because they don't need to do anything. Exactly. So the people who need to do something, which is from the middle class, upper class, companies that are large, those people are already being sensitized. And we have a program for capacity building for professionals, even professional bodies and consultants need to understand it because they will help others to comply. Tax officers, federal level, state level, local government level, how do you build those capacity? And even in terms of communication, one of the plans we have is how do you translate the tax laws into Pidgin, Yoruba, Igbo, and Hausa? And can we also do audio interaction? So I can't read, I can't write, but I can just press a button and it's reading the section I want to me in the language that I can understand. So all those other processes would happen as soon as the laws have been enacted in the lead up to implementation of those laws.
Thank you. Now, Sharif, I'm sure these two numbers will not forgive us if we don't tack on that part. Maybe that's what you want to, because we should add that content creators and the rest of them.
Exactly. Still a follow-up to what he asked. I don't know. Being in the communication space, we understand that there are a couple of people, like content creators, regular people on the streets that maybe need sensitization. Some of them want to carry on this message. I'm sure that's one of the reasons why he asked that, want to carry on this message. So maybe there has to be a platform somehow to bring them together to, maybe sensitize them, maybe at on a pro bono basis, and then, they'll just educate more.
There have been quite a good number of Nigerians online in the digital space that have on their own tried to understand the reforms, and they've been projecting it as best as they could. Of course, there are also a good number of people that are against it, either because they don't fully understand or they just have something they don't like about the system. And all of that is perfectly in order. You need to have a society where there's healthy debates. The only thing we encourage people to do is to be constructive with it, because if you're not constructive, then you're objecting not with the view to develop your country, but to bring it down. And that's not what anybody should do. So we share a lot of information. We have social media accounts. We do, like Twitter Space. We do recording that is shared on YouTube. We have a website that is very active. We have a WhatsApp account. We have, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn.
LinkedIn.
We have all of that to connect. So which means anyone that is interested will find information, right? But if someone is not interested, there's not so much you can do.
Yes,
Even if you call for a meeting, which was our experience before, you will see very few people are interested in coming for those meetings. You do it online, so maybe we shouldn't complain because we often have even over 1,000 people join. But if you think about the size of Nigeria, 1,000 is a drop in the ocean, right? So you say, why don't you have 200,000 people join?
Yeah.
So we continue with this advocacy and sensitization, but at the end of the day, it's a two-way thing. So there has to be people trying to push the reform, communicating clearly and engaging, and at the other end, the society and the people must show interest in wanting to understand because it's going to affect their lives. So they need to understand it so they can be part of the process rather than complaining after the process is completed.
Okay, sir. So I want to move on to having mandatory tax identification numbers. For a whole lot of us, like in the formal sector, we have our tax identification numbers, and to an extent, for some state IRS, that's Internal Revenue Service, we've been, you can track, some of your tax payment. So, but for the benefit of our viewers, can you please maybe just expatiate on how these mandatory tax identification numbers, will aid in data tracking, tax data tracking, and the benefit of it to, the regular man paying the tax and even to the government?
Yeah, so one of the things that we have in the tax reform is to expand the scope of tax identification. So what you have today is you have the tax identification number TIN, that is used. FRS will have their own, every state has their own, and there's one by the Joint Tax Board. First is to try and harmonize all of that. And two, we're saying, why is it that the tax identification number captures maybe less than 10 million Nigerians, but BVN alone is close to 40 million? If you go to the voters register, over 70 million. So that's data that tells you that you have more adults. By the way, registering and getting the tax number does not mean you have to pay tax. It just means that we need to identify you in the system, even if you are not paying tax. So what we have in the tax reform is to expand the scope of tax identification beyond TIN. So it has things like BVN. You can also use something like your voters register. In fact, we think that we can get to a point where we can use your phone number because your phone number is unique and it can be tied to you, right? Ultimately, we want the primary identification for an individual to be the NIN, and all other identities should be built on it. For a company, their primary identification should be their registration with the Corporate Affairs Commission. Everything else can be built on it. Now, this helps us to then connect the intelligence and data within the ecosystem. So if I'm a dishonest taxpayer who says I only earn 1 million naira a year, but in just one sitting at a bar, I spent more than 1 million. I go to the mall, I travel abroad. Maybe I bought a new car during the year and I registered it. Maybe I built a new house, I connect to electricity. All that data is in the system, but today is not being connected. Once you connect it, what will happen is when I declare my 1 million naira as my income for the year, the system will say, but this guy spent 15 million naira. So how did you spend the money that you did not earn? Were you printing naira or what? So that is how to make the system work, so that the equity and fairness we are looking for is actually implemented. And once that has been implemented, you solve half of the problem. The other half is now how you do take that money and use it for the purpose of the people, which I also addressed earlier on. So there'll be benefit for the system, there'll be benefit for the individual. Today, if you live and work in the FCT and you pay all your taxes, and you go to your home state, maybe it's Kaduna, maybe it's Ekiti, and you want to buy land, they still force you to pay tax.
That's true.
Because first, they don't trust what you've paid in the FCT. They don't have a very practical means of verifying it. And to be honest, many of them can't be bothered. And that's against the law. So imagine we have this connected system. All you need to do is give them your number, and with 1 or 2 clicks, they can see everything, whether you are lying or not. And same thing for people who are doing businesses across states, right? So this is a system that is going to relieve us of those duplications that is increasing our costs and our burden of doing everything that we do on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, so I still want to follow up now on complaints. We're talking of SMEs, small businesses and, growing businesses. I want you to help highlight, the aspect of this new tax law, if passed, that benefits all the small businesses. I know for one that I read that maybe businesses that don't have a turnover of less than 50 million thereabout can, but I know there'll be 1 or 2 other benefits. I just want you to highlight it for the benefit of viewers.
Yeah, so there's a lot of benefits in the tax reform. By the way, the tax reform goes beyond the tax bills. So, for example, at the beginning of 2025, we had a withholding tax regulation that came into effect. And for small businesses, if they invoice their customers, withholding tax will not be deducted on them. So, which means they get their money in full, they can use it to run their business and their working capital and make more money in the process. They also don't have to deduct withholding tax when they receive an invoice and they are paying the vendor, unless they are paying a vendor who is earning a lot of money, like more than 2 million naira in one transaction, right? So that's one burden taken off them. Number 2 is many of these small businesses don't have a lot of money to pay. So you find that what they are paying their staff is small amount of salary, like 40K, 30K, 50K. Remove PAY. So they don't even have, as a small business owner, you have 2 or 3 employees, you don't have to worry about PAY for them because they've been exempted. So that also benefits you. Okay. Then there's VAT. Okay. You don't have to charge VAT until your annual turnover is more than 50 million naira. So just imagine the number of small businesses that you protected by saying they don't have to charge VAT on there. And then if you register a small business as a company, you don't have to pay company's income tax, no education tax until your turnover exceeds 50 million naira. In addition to that, as a small business, once you provide your data, right, there is the incentive for you to formalize your business. Because like I said, once you formalize and we have your record, you enjoy all these benefits. But if you have no record to show us at all, why should we believe what you're telling us? We do presumptive tax on you and you have to pay something. If we do presumptive tax on you today and you pay, it's an indication that maybe that amount is too small. The tax man can increase it next year until you are compelled into doing things right. And we're not saying you should go and hire an accountant, right? We're just saying use POS machine to make payment. Keep record of who is owing you. And they don't have to be proper account like accountants would do. You just keep those records somewhere that you can use to demonstrate to a third party. Collect receipt when you pay for something, right? So that ultimately would also help you as a small business when you have record to some extent to have access to credit. So if you go to a bank and there are credit facility for small business, you can't access it just because you say you're a small business. The bank will ask you for some documentation. Now, once you can provide those documentation, you access credit, you can expand your business. We want you to grow, we want you to be big. We want you to be big enough that you can pay so much in taxes. So that is the whole idea. I think that, in fact, the small business ecosystem should be the biggest beneficiary of the reforms.
Thank you, sir. So I'll still follow up again, because, in Nigeria for years, growing up as a young person, we know corruption has always been the main thing everywhere. Everybody says, and I know your answer to an extent, with what the role of the ombudsman, to play in this regard. But still, tax administration now, for some people, they feel that some big businesses now, aside the fact that they may get tax breaks. So, we've heard it, people say it, allegedly, that there are big businesses that maybe just pay a certain amount, not the full amount of taxes that they're supposed to pay. So, for such cases now, how does this new tax law, how will it address such cases?
So first, I think there is no data to support the assumption that large businesses don't pay their taxes, and then to assume that small businesses pay their taxes. So I think the level of non-compliance in Nigeria is high across the board, but it's actually better at the large businesses level. So for example, 97% of our VAT revenue comes from the top 3% of businesses in Nigeria. So because the bigger you are, the harder it is to hide. So that is why, so for example, MTN will not refuse to pay VAT they have collected. Government will descend on them because
That's true.
of course, they will know immediately.
That's true.
So I think we need to address that, so we work with data, not based on sentiment. So having said that, the way the system is being designed now is to create data that you can use to validate and flag non-compliance. For example, we're saying to ourselves, if you buy this mobile phone, from me, and you report it to the tax authority at a certain amount, so you can get tax deduction for it, and that amount is more than the amount at which I sold it to you, why can't the system link the two of you together? Or maybe you've imported the item. You don't want to pay import duties. You under-declare it. You declare only 10% of the value. You go to FRS, you want to claim tax deduction, you declare 150% of the value. And we still can't find out, why is it that in 2025 we're not finding out? That should be so easy. So by integrating the system, for every buyer, there's a seller.
That's true.
So the system will just cross-check. If there's a difference, it will flag that transaction. So it just generates a report, and we'll call it risk-based audit. So instead of trying to chase everybody around, the system will tell you who you need to go and audit, because it will flag it, you generate the report, and you're going to ask them, you're not accusing them of lying, you're just saying, your information is not adding up. Can you tell us what has happened? If you import items, let's say 1,000 units of this mobile phone, as you're clearing it at customs, the system will add inventory of 1,000 phones into your account with the tax authority. There's something in the tax reform that we call fiscalization or electronic invoicing. So that system, we have a software you can put on your ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning System. If you don't have all of that complication, you get a device that looks like a POS. Every time you sell 1 unit of your phone, you must use that system developed by the government. And the system will reduce your inventory by 1 unit. And say you have 999 you haven't sold. The day you invoice 5, it will take it out. If you refuse to use government system to do the invoice, the system will not see it. At the end of the year, when you file your account, you say you have unsold inventory of phone of 200. The system says it's 700 you haven't sold. Then you must come and explain what happened to 500 phones. They disappear. So there's a lot of things we can do, particularly with technology, to make sure everybody complies and everybody does the right thing, whether they are big or small. So we've also tried to address a lot of the distortionary incentives and waivers that we have in the system, where the powers that be, the large businesses, multinationals, are able to wriggle their ways and get those waivers that are not available to small businesses. We've also reformed that as well. 1, to preserve government revenue, and 2, to create a level playing field for everyone. So all in all, we are confident that these reforms will move us in the right direction.
So the final question for me would be, are there any punitive measures for tax evasion? Because we know people want to try to cut corners as much as possible, especially for a new system like this one. So what's out there?
People are cutting corners today, massively. We think that the tax gap, that's the difference between taxes we could be collecting and what we're actually collecting. We think that tax gap is around 70%. So which means people are cutting corners today and they're evading their taxes. And the sad part is there's little or no consequences. So what this system is doing now is to have credible data, first and foremost, about all taxpayers, credible data about what they are doing, and then we compare that with the taxes they pay, so that when I come to you as a taxman I will not be saying, please tell me how much you earn. I'll be telling you this is how much you have earned. In fact, we think we're going to get to a point where the system can pre-populate your tax return for you. So you just go on the system and you just confirm it, right? Because we know when you're buying things, we know when you earn income, you know. So, and once you've done that, the other part then is consequence administration or management. There are penalties in the law, mostly financial penalties, for civil violation of your tax obligation, but there are also criminal penalties there. If you go and forge, tax record, or you hide your information, you can go to jail. Those provisions are there. So what we're going to do differently now is a mechanism to make sure that those things are implemented. And part of the requirement is in the law, I can be the one to instigate an action because I'm an interested party if I know someone who is doing the wrong thing. We call it the social norm. If you know that everybody around you is not paying their taxes, you don't want to pay because you don't want to be like the stupid person who is paying. But if we all hold ourselves to account collectively, and there's just one person who doesn't want to pay, we can tackle them. And that's how societies are built. The countries where majority of our citizens, particularly the young people, want to relocate to, this is how they're built. That's the most sustainable way to run an economy, is by making the tax system work and working effectively.
Thank you very much for staying with us as viewers on this maiden episode of Policy in Focus. We've been speaking with the chairman of the Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms Committee, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me.
The new tax regime that's proposed is not punitive. It's meant to simplify the tax system, harmonize the tax system, ensure that there's equity and fairness, and again, there will be an ombudsman that will address issues of exploitation and all of that, which we hope will never be in this case. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Until next time, I'm Francis Jakpor, and he is
Sheriff Aderibigbe. See you.